So with macro, remember we're talking about the UK economy, and micro is about individuals and firms. And in micro, you're going to see more specific stuff like the market for cigarettes or the market for chocolate. Whereas with macro, it doesn't matter what good or service it is, it's just about the UK economy as a whole. The first thing that we actually started with this, but let's go through the diagrams first. So in macroeconomics, you've got aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply, and long run aggregate supply, and also a Keynesian LRAS curve. Let's just know what the factors are of each of them and when to use them. The definitions of them aren't that important. Maybe just AD is total planned spending in the economy, and LRAS is the capacity of the economy. Okay. Um, but most importantly, the factors. So AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. These are all of the things that shift the AD curve. So if C increases, AD shifts to the right. If I increases, AD shifts to the right. If G increases, AD shifts to the right. If X increases, AD shifts to the right, and so on. So C is consumer spending, I is investment, so basically spending by firms, and G is government spending, and X minus M is exports minus imports. I would also try and know what affects each of those things. So for example, for C, you've got, and it's logical, it's common sense, so you don't have to force yourself to memorize it word for word, but just try and remember it's consumer confidence, interest rates, and disposable incomes, and also some other things, but especially these three that will impact it. Business spending, the investment, will be affected by interest rates as well, and also by business confidence. Governments will spend more or less money depending on the state of the economy, and X minus M will vary based on the exchange rates and some other stuff as well. So if any of these things change, then one of these will change. And if one of these change, then this will change. And then you can just draw your diagram. SRAS is affected by costs of production. And there are just a few that we should be aware of. Wages, raw material prices, and another good one could be exchange rates. Also other stuff like price of technology or anything sensible that you can think of, that would be a cost of production. If any of these increase, cost of production will increase. If cost of production increase, SRS will shift to the left. And LRAS is your productive capacity. That's going to be impacted only by, or mostly by supply side policies. That's something we'll go over afterwards. We went through the four objectives. So they were inflation, being at 2%, low unemployment, economic growth, and a balance of payments on the current account. But we said that we would mostly cover balance of payments when we do year 13 stuff. The main thing I wanted you to focus on was the causes of unemployment, the causes of inflation, and why they are bad if the target's not met, like how to describe that. So let's just go through that bit by bit one more time. First of all, the cause of inflation. Um, when I say cause, I'm basically just talking about the diagram. What two things can happen on the diagram that can cause inflation? So, um, so we know that inflation is a rise in average price level. So that's when the prices of everything go up in the economy. That can be caused by AD shifting to the right or SRAS shifting to the left. And there's a fancy name for them. But the most important thing is you remember this. The fancy name is just demand pull. And the fancy name for this is just cost push. Okay. So in macro, we have AD, and we can usually just draw SRAS. And then if AD shifts to the right, there would be an increase in the price level. And if SRAS shifted to the left, there would also be an increase in the price level. So those are the two causes of inflation. Um, we spoke about why inflation is bad, and we also spoke about why deflation is bad. So inflation is bad because it means that prices are consistently rising whilst wages are not rising as often. This means that disposable incomes would be falling because consumers would have less money left over after their normal spending, meaning that they're going to suffer from worse living standards. And deflation is bad because prices are consistently falling, which would encourage consumers to delay spending due to uncertainty or due to expectations of cheaper prices in the future. That would lead to consumer spending falling, and that would lead to, if that falls, that would fall. That means AD will shift to the left. It's literally that logical every time. Just write that equation out, pick one of them. So consumer confidence is falling or uncertainty is falling, so consumer spending is falling. If that falls, then that would fall. AD shifts to the left. Draw your diagram and explain your diagram. When we're explaining our diagram, just say what happens on the axis. Y1 goes down to Y2, and the price level goes down from PO1 to PO2. And we can talk about this every single time in a lot of detail. If output falls from Y1 to Y2, that means there's going to be less economic growth or an economic decline. And it also means that there's going to be higher unemployment. So the reason for that is that the reason for that is labor is a derived demand. So if the demand for goods and services has fallen because people are waiting for them to be cheaper, then firms are not going to need workers. So they're going to lay off their workers, and that's going to lead to even more unemployment. And that's going to lead to even more people being scared or uncertain or low confidence. And that's going to lead to even more falls in the AD curve. If that continues for 2 consecutive quarters, that would be called a recession. That's terrible because the government would have to spend more on welfare payments, such as unemployment benefits, and they'd also collect less tax. Unemployment is bad basically for the same reason as what we are talking about with deflation. So unemployment is when people are willing and able to work but can't find a job. There will be more people with a low or no disposable income, so they'd have a worse, they'd have a decline in their living standards. If people have low disposable incomes, consumer spending will fall. If that falls, then that will shift to the left. And then we do the same thing. We say that Y1 goes down to Y2. That means that there's going to be lower economic growth and higher unemployment because labor is a derived demand. It's going to cause a even further spiral of low confidence, more deflation, even more unemployment, damaging to the economy, lower tax revenue for the government, more welfare payments spending, people's living standards are falling, same kind of stuff. So as long as you get the logic of how to link the diagram to your point, you can just change it slightly with each question. And in macro, it's usually going to be the impact of something on the four objectives. So you just have to link it to the diagram. So the next objective was economic growth. That is when there is an increase in real GDP. The economic cycle has a boom, a downturn, a recession, and a recovery. And output gaps are when economic growth goes like very, very high or very, very low. So basically, in general, the economy will always grow at a certain trend rate. So that's my trend rate of growth. And then my actual growth will go very high or very low. And it can fluctuate in a cycle. It's my growth rate. Or like that could even just be my real GDP. And that's time. So, and the curved one's my actual rate. So in the moments when my actual rate of economic growth is higher than my long-term trend rate of economic growth, that's a positive output gap. And when it's below trend rate of growth, it's a negative output gap. Um, when we're in a boom, like over here, a boom is going to always have very, very low unemployment. Everyone's going to have a job. It's going to have very high economic growth, of course. Balance of payments can go either way, but we're going to talk about that more next year. And then the only downside is that there's going to be high inflation, especially demand pull inflation. So output gaps are when actual growth rate is higher or lower than trend growth rate. Another thing is so short run or actual. So Edexcel calls it actual um, versus long term, and then AQA calls it short run versus long run. But this short run or the actual economic growth is just when real GDP increases, e.g., because AD shifts to the right or SRAS shifts to the right. Okay. And then the long run or the trend rate of growth is when LRAS or your productive potential increases. Basically meaning it's more like how much is the economy capable of producing at its maximum, not like how much it's actually working at right now. Mm, so yeah, economic growth is good because it's linked to low unemployment. There'll be lots of jobs being created, confidence will be high, spending will be high, and then it can also lead to high inflation, especially if it's this actual growth, which is when AD shifts to the right, because when that happens, that causes pressure on prices. Also, one thing I forgot to mention was when to use the Keynesian AS curve. So if I was to basically draw, so AD is always going to be like this downward sloping straight line. Sometimes, most of the time, if I'm just showing how AD changes, I can just show an SRAS curve. If I want to demonstrate the impact of supply side policies, I can do an LRAS curve as well, which is just a vertical curve. It just shows like my limit of full employment. So that's like how much the economy can produce at maximum. But if I want to show basically how inflation changes in a more realistic way, I can draw this curved AS curve, which is called a Keynesian aggregate supply curve. It just basically shows me that um, when AD changes along this section, there's barely any change in the price. And when AD starts changing up here, even if it changes a bit, there's a massive change in the price. Does that make sense?
Wait, can you just explain that one more time?
Yeah. So if AD goes like from here to here, does the price go down by much? Not
Not that
really,
much.
not that much. But
Yeah,
if AD goes to the right
it goes up by a lot.
a lot, so that the reason for that is as we approach when we're not at full capacity, AD can increase and it won't put any pressure on prices because let's say I'm going to an empty shop and they have a few more customers now, they're not going to be stressed. They're not going to feel the need to increase their prices. But if I'm going into a shop that's full, so a barber shop's been fully booked out, and there's more and more people queuing up, then they're going to start feeling more overwhelmed, and they're going to start to increase their prices. So that's what happens as we get closer to full employment. Um, so which scenario would be a negative output gap? Would it be um 82 or would it be 83? Sweden, do you want to have a guess?
What did you say?
Which one of these would be a negative output gap? Would it be 82 or would it be 83?
Uh, real output.
So is a negative output gap when actual growth
Wait,
is
it's gonna be AD2.
yeah, because if we look back here, a negative output gap is scenario B where actual growth is not that high. Yeah. So yeah, 82 is a negative output gap because around like as we get towards this point, when it starts to get really steep, after that we're going to have positive output gaps when we're passing full employment, when every shop becomes full.